I was at a music camp school, junior high grades. Most of the camp took place in one large building that contained both the rehearsal spaces and the dormitory. It is a very old building that at one time had been the estate of a very wealthy family. There were both day students and sleepover students. Some students went home on weekends. Our bedroom slept 4, 2 bunk beds. It was connected to another slightly larger room that served as the day student lounge through the shared bathroom. The week before my Poltergeist experience, 4 of us were sleeping in our room. One student went into the bathroom in the middle of the night. He runs out of the bathroom into the hallway screaming, waking up the entire dorm. He was in shock and crouched in a fetal position and shaking violently. He was unable or unwilling to speak for several minutes. People are upset and insisting he tell them what happened. He finally begins to speak. He said he was peeing, heard someone laugh behind him, and turned around to see a ghostly old man standing in the bathtub, grimacing at him menacingly. He was sure the man wanted to hurt him. He was the most awkward, shy, and nervous student at the school, so people just assumed he imagined it. None of us took him seriously. That next weekend there were just 2 of us sleeping in the room, in the same bunk bed. I was on the bottom bunk. We had left the door to the bathroom open with the bathroom light on. My bunkmate was already asleep, and as I was falling asleep, the light clicked off. It was one of those old light switches with the 2 buttons. You push one in and the other pops out. The light switch was on a small length of wall just to the right of the door, and on the wall next to it was the sink. There was no way someone could push the light switch without being visible from our room. I got up, made my way through the dark by moonlight, and turned the light back on. I really thought nothing of it, and just as I was falling asleep, the light clicked off again. I got up and turned it back on. This happened several times, and it always turned off right as I was about to drift off to sleep. I decided to go into the adjoining room and see if anyone was there. I looked under every bed and behind all the couches and in the closets. No one was there, so I laid back down, and eventually the light clicks off again, just as I'm about to fall asleep. You can hear the buttons click each time, but you can't see anyone in the bathroom. I'm fed up. I jump out of bed and storm into the bathroom and through to the adjoining room. I see no one. I loudly announce that I am tired of this shit, and that I will be waiting on my bed with a baseball bat for the lights to go out again, and will beat the piss out of whoever does it. I leave the door to the bathroom wide open. In fact, I propped it open with something. I can't remember what. Probably a shampoo bottle or a shoe. I go pick up the bat and sit down on the edge of my bed. And as soon as I do, the light goes off again. This time while I'm wide awake and staring into the bathroom. There is clearly no one. My bunkmate is asleep through all of this. He slept like a log. "Hey," I say indignantly. The light goes back on. I stand up and take a couple steps toward the bathroom. The light goes off. I freeze. The light goes on. It goes off again quickly, and then on again quickly. I retreat back to bed. The light starts going off and on like a machine gun. It looks like a strobe light. You can hear the buttons being mashed incredibly fast and with great force. It stops in the on position. Whatever I propped the door open with flies out of the bathroom and hits a window, and the door slams shut with incredible force. The light goes off, and there is a horrible, horrible laugh that comes from the bathroom. I'm sitting on my bed with my blanket around me like a shield, and the bat is my sword. I can't speak for a few minutes, and I'm practically hyperventilating. I finally managed to call out to my bunkmate several times, partially waking him up. I try to somewhat incoherently explain what has just happened. He's only half awake and says something like, "Uh-huh," and falls back to sleep. I have a feeling that if I do anything even slightly provocative, that the confrontation with whatever this thing is will escalate. I consider sprinting out of the room, but it's dark, and I also don't feel like I should leave my friend alone. I want to leave the room with my friend, but can't bring myself to leave the safety of my bunk. I consider yelling and potentially waking the few other students staying in the dorm over the weekend, but I'm afraid of attracting any more attention from whatever is in the bathroom, especially if that means I would be facing the wrath alone. So I ultimately decide against it. After at least an hour of nothing more happening, during which I frequently repeat to myself over and over, "This really happened. This really happened," I fall asleep myself, exhausted from fear. My bunkmate remembers nothing the next day, and when I try to talk to the kid that saw the ghostly old man in the bathroom the following Monday, he refuses to speak of it. "We can't talk about him. We can't." Today, many years later, I'm connected to that same kid, now an adult, on Facebook, and he still refuses to communicate about this. Any message I send him that mentions it gets ignored. My mom and I both work at a very old, very haunted hotel. We used to be very open about our hauntings, but our current owner is a real jackass who refuses to acknowledge this, despite the business it could bring in. So we no longer put it in brochures or broadcast it in any way. But I guess it makes it all the more convincing when guests tell us crazy stories, as they usually have no prior knowledge of the hauntings or even the history of this place, which is a real shame because the building has some serious connections to incredible people who played a major part in founding the country. So a few weeks back, we were in the middle of our January lull. Every year during that month, a lot of us get laid off because we're not needed. So it's pretty quiet around here, between the lack of both guests and employees. However, this night we did have 2 guests check in, both of whom were local, and they were celebrating a special occasion as the guy had flowers delivered to the room before they checked in. They went to the restaurant to eat dinner, and then went to their rooms shortly after 9 p.m. At 10:45, my mom was startled to see them standing at the front desk with their luggage, looking pale and terrified. They were very reluctant to tell my mom what had happened, but said that they wanted to check out now and not wait until morning. My mom has seen this look on guests' faces before and finally coaxed the truth out of the guy. Apparently, they had went to bed a bit after 10, and a half an hour later they shot awake to a great crash and the sound of glass breaking. They scrambled out of bed and flipped the light switch on, and couldn't believe what they saw. The massive, heavy glass lamp on the bedside table had been knocked off and onto the floor, where it lay in pieces next to the alarm clock, as though someone had just taken their arm and swept the whole lot off in a rage. After seeing this, the couple grabbed their things and bolted out of the room. And when they were checking out, they were so embarrassed that they didn't even want a refund, and refused my mom's offer to move them into another room, even though it would have been a huge upgrade. The woman just kept saying,
"I just want to sleep in my own bed tonight."
And the guy told my mom,
"We may come back one day, but never again during the month of January when the hotel is nearly empty."
My mom apologized as best she could for the craziness and checked them out, and she gave them a refund anyway since they had only used the room for a very short while. When they left, she and a coworker immediately went to view the room and found everything was just as they described. While they were marveling at the strangeness of it all, a faint sound nearly scared them to death. It was the woman's cell phone, vibrating under the sheets where she had left it in their frenzy to get out. They grabbed the phone and headed back to the front desk, where they were met by the guy coming to ask if they had found it. With his wife waiting in the car, he decided to open up a bit more to my mom about the incident, as his wife was already terrified, and he knew it would make it worse. He said that before they fell asleep, he had felt an undeniable sense of dread, as though something was going to happen. And when the sound first woke him up, he looked toward the foot of the bed and saw the silhouette of his wife standing there. He asked if she was okay, and heard her voice answer right next to him. She was still in the bed. We've had people hear voices in music, see apparitions, and capture incredible images on camera, one of which was a young man dressed in colonial-era clothing, and you can see him clearly, down to his hair and belt. But for someone or something to sweep a lamp and a clock off the table is very unusual. Our phenomena is very rarely of the physical variety, so I am not sure what to make of this. I myself have never been frightened of whatever is here, Maybe because I'm a history lover and would almost welcome the prospect of seeing someone from such a long-gone era. As to who the woman was that this guy saw at the foot of his bed, I have no idea. We do have a very well-known female spirit in the hotel, supposedly from the era when it was a Civil War hospital. But the building also served as an elite college for women, and it was also a home when it was first built, so it could be anyone, for all we know. I'm 29 years old, and this happened about 13 or 14 years ago. Back in the day, the soldiers who have been stationed here would go out to train in the woods. We would go there almost every day, checking the shooting ranges for bullets, shells, etc., whatever we could find. Since I'm half American, I would talk to many soldiers, and often we would trade beer or chocolate for some MREs. In this forest, there used to live a woman. We called her Waldhexe. I guess you would translate it to forest witch in English. This woman lived in the woods for 25 years. The last thing I heard about this woman was that she got arrested by the police and is locked up in a mental asylum. We often talked to this lady, and she would talk about random stuff that made no sense at all. She often talked about Witchelmanner. I have no clue what the English translation would be. Maybe some kind of dwarf or imp, but I'm not too sure about that. She even showed us the clothing she sewed for them and said it was some kind of tribute so that she could live peacefully in the forest. Judging by the size of the clothing, they had to be like a foot tall. Anyway, on this particular day, two buddies and I decided to ride our bikes deeper into the woods just to explore and maybe find a new shooting range. In the distance, we saw a person sitting on a log beside the trail. My buddy was like, "That has to be the witch," and it turned out he was right. As we got closer to her, she stood up and blocked our path. She was really angry and asked us what we were doing there. We told her that we just wanted to explore the woods some more. This is about the time I started getting creeped out. She started to talk weird stuff about Krabbenmenschen, some kind of crab humanoids. At one point we'd had enough of her crazy stories, and we kind of laughed it off. I said, "Well, maybe we'll meet one of your friends along the way." We hopped back on our bikes, and just as I was going to pedal off, she suddenly grabbed my arm. It was a really tight grip, and with a kind of creepy smile, she said, "I warned you." I told her to go to hell, and she let me go. We kept advancing deeper into the woods and joking about the things she said. We maybe did about 2 more kilometers until the trail was so bad it became impossible to ride a bike. So we took a break and then decided that we'd turn around. All 3 of us were just sitting on an old log, and suddenly I got the goosebumps, and even my eyes got a little watery. I look over to Daniel and notice he has goosebumps too. Mark, my other friend who was with us, said, "You guys feel that too? We are being watched." Daniel is the type of guy who always goofs around, and I would have bet all my money in that moment that he would say something like, "The crab people are stalking us," just to break the tension, but he didn't. Instead, he said with this serious tone, "We should get the hell out of here now." We were riding out of the woods at a really fast pace, and it felt like forever to get out of there. We have never really talked about it, not even after all these years. I have goosebumps as I write this. I was really scared that day. The silence is what freaked me out. You didn't hear a bird, a branch falling off a tree, nothing. Just dead silence. Who knows what is out there? As of March, I was put on medical disability because I was diagnosed with epilepsy. So I've been home from work ever since. I live with my boyfriend and my young son. I didn't drive beforehand due to my anxiety. I've been in some serious car accidents when I was younger with my father, one of them almost being fatal, and since my diagnosis, I definitely cannot drive now. I would spend time when I'm not cooking, cleaning, or doing general upkeep on our home on social media. It was really only Instagram I had at the time. I had deleted my Facebook almost a year ago, and I didn't have Reddit at the time this incident happened. I was constantly on Instagram, and it bothered me. I became so obsessed with what everyone was doing. My seizures from epilepsy still aren't stabilized, and so there's still much I can't do. Not to mention my stress and anxiety only help bring on seizures. So when I saw people I knew able to go out and just enjoy their life, I became depressed. I used to be them. I used to be able to take my son on walks, and now I live in fear that I'll have one while we're out, and he'll panic. I decided that I was going to delete my IG, go back to school and take online classes to utilize my time off, instead of wallowing and obsessing over social media. I permanently deleted Instagram first. Next was Facebook. Now, like I said, I had deleted my Facebook almost a year ago, but I wanted to permanently delete it. I didn't remember my login, but I knew I had it in my email somewhere. I have an iPhone, so I went to the Mail app and searched Facebook. Boom, it popped up, and I found my login information. I guess you can't permanently delete Facebook? I tried Googling it, but nothing came up. Just deactivating it was all I could find. I was a little upset that I wasted my time, but whatever. Later on that night, I get a text. It's from one of those notification text numbers to get updates on whatever. It was a text from Facebook, giving me a number to reactivate. I thought it was my phone trying to play catch-up from earlier, so I left it alone, not realizing that they were two different numbers. The next day, my boyfriend, I guess, was lurking on Facebook and saw that mine was showing up. I thought you deleted your Facebook.
Yeah, I did. I deactivated it again, when I figured out that that was the only way of deleting it.
Well, it's still up. He shows me my profile. Confused, I handle it immediately, deactivate it again. So my boyfriend and I are laying in bed watching a movie. He fell asleep, so I was finishing up the movie before bed when my phone goes off. Again, same text from Facebook giving me an activation code. This time I look into it, realize that they're two different numbers. I log into my account, check the privacy settings, changed things around so pretty much everything was private, and I also had old numbers on there, so I deleted them too. This happens for a couple more days before I decide to completely wipe clean my profile, meaning I deleted all pictures, all information on me, changed the name, and even deleted all posts that were on my wall. However, before I could do that, it showed that I posted a status 15 minutes ago.
I found you.
The status read. I remember dropping my phone in fear and was frozen. My boyfriend woke up from my phone dropping and saw me just standing beside the bed. Concerned, he asked if I was okay. I became hysterical, showing him the status. A little freaked out himself, he helped me get everything off of there. He calmed me down and reassured me that it was probably some kid that hacked my account, or maybe a frenemy from high school, which still seemed so far-fetched, but I thought to myself that it probably won't happen again. Maybe a week later, I'm finishing up mopping our kitchen floor when my phone rings from an unknown number. Usually I screen my phone calls, but since I have a number of doctors and different offices I go to for testing now, I figured it could be one of the offices scheduling a routine EEG, so I answer it, and it was just breathing at first. Thinking they didn't hear me, I say hello again, and the breathing stopped.
I found you,
the voice said, along with giggling. I immediately hung up, ran to our kitchen window to see if anyone was out in our front yard, ran to our back door to check if anyone was in the back, but there was no one. I call my boyfriend hysterical, since it was only me and my son home. He advises me to give him the number and he will handle it, so I gave it to him. 10 minutes later, he calls me back, saying it must be a burner phone or a text-free number, because it's coming up as not in service when he calls. He tells me he's on his way home from work. Terrified, I sat in my living room with all the lights off. No TV, no noise. My son was watching YouTube alongside me, but his headphones were in. I made sure all doors and windows were locked, our front door was dead-bolted, and that all the curtains were drawn. My boyfriend came home and decided we should file a police report just in case. Well, fast forward a few days, and I get another phone call. This time, far more unnerving than the last. He giggles, maniacally at that, and spouts the same.
I found you.
But then he adds,
You're all alone today.
and he wasn't wrong. My son was at his father's house that day, and my boyfriend was at work. We have cameras on our property, and our property is wooden gated, so we lock all entrances at night. But still, I was terrified. Nothing came up on the cameras. No locks were messed with. My boyfriend thinks it's just some random person who got a hold of my phone number from Facebook and decided to mess with me. My number was never public on Facebook, though. And how would this guy know I was alone? I haven't heard from him in a couple of weeks, and we're moving this month, and it's the biggest sigh of relief for me. I am not religious, which makes this story hard for me to believe, but the rest of my family is, and for some reason, when Mom and Dad were still together, they prayed when riding the bus. That was just some habit they had. Also, we live in Finland, and strange things are quite rare here. This happened before I was born. I was in the womb. Mom and Dad got on the bus and noticed a tall, slim, dark thing in the seat behind the driver. It was wearing black robes. To this day, they aren't sure if it was a man or a woman. They sat a couple of seats behind the thing, and as usual, started praying. Mom noticed the head of this thing starting to shiver and jolt lightly. She didn't let it bother her, but the more they prayed, and the more into Maki, where Mom and Dad lived, the bus got, the more the head of the thing started jolting. Mom still shivers when she talks about it. She has had many nightmares about the thing. She started to get a weird feeling. Dad didn't care as much. He was used to weirdos, but the jolting intensified, and the long, greasy hair barely holding onto the head started whipping. The thing started growling and hissing. Then suddenly, it stopped. Mom swears its head turned 180 degrees. It stared with soulless and dark eyes straight at her. A wave of panic overtook her, and she started frantically pressing the stop button. They got off, and Dad asked, "What? What is it?" Mom explained the whole thing, but Dad just brushed it off. He said that Maki was the home of weirdos and crackheads, which is true. But here's the kicker. Mom often had visions, and they are often true. Once she saved a guy from committing suicide. She had a vision that he was going to run and jump off the roof. He said afterwards that he had told God that if someone does not come and speak to him, he will commit suicide. Back to the story though. She had a vision of the thing standing out in front of their house, and she freaked out. She refused to go home, but Dad, in his nature, dragged Mom along and ensured her that she was going to be okay, and that her vision was ridiculous. I bet you know where this is going. They got home, and sure enough, the thing was standing there, right in front of their front door. They freaked out and ran. They got to a bar and called a priest. He said that under no circumstances were they to touch, let alone approach the thing. They waited in the bar for hours, and when they went home, it was gone. They then had the priest come and purify their house. I have a hard time believing this story, but I have had my own spiritual happening before. When my girlfriend and I were walking through the forest, a wave of fear washed over me. I felt it was coming from a dark old tree. I wanted to leave immediately, but my girlfriend dragged me along and sat down next to the tree. "This is where I tried to hang myself," she mumbled. "I can't explain that." I have an experience I have told many people about, but no one believes me except my family. This makes me think they have had similar experiences. They believe talking about these things welcomes them. My family had a ranch growing up in Northern California. It's been in our family since the early 1900s. It's surrounded by forest about 100 feet away from the house. Cowboys would pay to take a bath on their travels and sleep in the stable. There is still a sign up there for the baths. We converted that stable into a home after the original house my grandfather built burnt down in the 50s. It's very isolated. My whole life, we would spend weekends up there. No phone, no cable, just electricity. If you got hurt or cut your hand in the wood splitter, tough luck. It's an hour to town. There were only basic necessities, wood-burning stove, old appliances, etc. Despite growing up there, we always carried guns, even to the bathroom that was connected to the house, but you had to go out the front door to get to it. It wasn't an outhouse, but kind of. As kids, we always had to be in groups of 3, or 1 kid and 1 adult. I had little things happen that terrified me, but was always told not to acknowledge it. When I was 21, my grandfather was having a hard time staying there all weekend, and I loved it up there, so I moved in with my dog. He was a big staffy pit bull, and went everywhere with me, in my tiny red 93 Miata. I loved that car. This was around 2009. My cell phone worked up there, but I had to set it on the specific shelf. But I could always call out standing on a chair by the shelf. I had a boyfriend who was an asshole. He came up every day, but never slept over. It was scary up there. I would watch movies and listen to the radio. Not having cable added to the isolation. So one day, it's super windy, but the power stayed on by some miracle. There was one light above the barn that barely reached my house, and the house had 2 front doors, one in the kitchen and one in my room on the same side of the house, about 15 or 20 feet apart. Well, my dog starts going crazy. I assume it's either the wind or a mountain lion. I wasn't about to let him out. The screen is kind of rattling with everything else, and then I hear it, right outside my door. I swear on my son, I heard a tiny voice say,
Hello?
pause,
Hello?
pause, and louder.
Hello?
It sounded like a very small person, but not a child. No knocking, no response to anything I said, just the same word over and over, but like they were trying to get it right. The L's sounded like R's. I was so petrified, and my dog is freaking out with his hair up. I'm calling my boyfriend and he's on the way, but it's like an hour to get up here, and everyone loses service on the way up. I called my grandfather and he was mad, saying to grab the gun and to not open that door. I was crying and begging for it to answer me. I asked if it needed help. Does it want my phone? I was so scared that it would only say hello. I told it if it tells me its name, I would let it in. But nothing. Everything felt so wrong. I did not try and peek out the window. It was old glass, the kind that looks uneven, if that makes sense. Very easily broken. My boyfriend arrived first, then my uncle. Before they got there, it became less and less, and then nothing. There's no way a person was wandering out there. The path to my stoop was all mud. The stable is kind of on a small cliff, so walking to the stoop where the stairs are is uphill from the house. There were no footprints, animal or human, in the mud. Nothing touched or taken, not even from the fridge that was outside near the bathroom area. I moved back to town not long after, and I never slept there again. The way my uncle acted when he got there was like he knew there was nothing to be found, and he didn't ask me many questions. He told me to keep my dog on a leash, and that was it, and no one talked about it the next day except me. I feel like since that happened to me, I'm kind of marked. I do remember being very scared of the woods growing up on the ranch, like I was being watched. Maybe I picked up on my parents' cues, or maybe I was being watched. Either way, I love the ranch, but I don't go up there anymore. One more thing. Despite generations of family going up there every few days to care for the property, no one has lived there full time since the house burned down. And we haven't kept animals up there either. No more livestock, not even a barned cat. Any ideas what this could be? One thing that bothered me for a long time after was the inflection it was using, as if it was a question at first. The way it spoke, I don't think it could say anything else, or I think it would have. It was confident and kind of menacing. The cadence was way off, like it was meticulously slowing its speech to sound human. But what bothers me the most about the inflection is if it couldn't say anything else and didn't know my language, then how did it know to phrase it in a question? I used to wonder if maybe it had seen or caught someone in the woods before, and then copied its words. Because that's exactly what you would say if you thought you were being followed. Hello? 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 That sort of thing. I still think about it a lot, and my heart still races remembering its voice. This happened when I was a child. I woke up one night. I was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and I saw my mom lying on the floor. This wasn't out of the ordinary, as she would often sleep on the floor of my room when my dad was gone on a hunting trip. I didn't think much of it and decided to try to go back to sleep. As I closed my eyes, I hear a deep voice.
Fix me.
It says. I was obviously scared and thought I was hearing things, and I hear it again.
Fix me.
It starts repeating over and over, and I'm in tears at this point. My mom and brother were still asleep and unaware of the noise. I couldn't figure out what the voice was talking about or what it was. I thought it may be my bed asking me to fix it, but it wasn't messed up. I tried to tuck it in neat and tidy while the voice kept going.
Fix me. Fix me. Fix me.
After I finished fixing my bed as best I could, it still wouldn't stop. I kept crying, whispering to the voice,
Please leave me alone. I fixed you.
but it didn't stop.
What do you need me to do? I'll fix you, but I don't know what you want.
And that's when it stopped. It stopped asking me to fix it, and I laid there for a good while, afraid to move or say anything else, before finally falling asleep. The next morning, I thought it may have been a dream. My mom wasn't on the floor, so maybe she had slept in her room. I went to the living room to find her watching the news. I asked her if she slept in our room last night, and she said yes, but was surprised I noticed, since she came in after we went to bed and was out before we woke up. I explained what happened, and she told me it was probably a toy. The only toy in the closet behind my bed that made noise was a Bob the Tomato talking plushie that said quotes. It sounds distinctly different from that deep voice I was hearing, but my mom insists it was just that toy that kept saying "fix me" that night. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My shirts, Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter are down there too. Be good to animals, even people, shit.
Jag snämmar Bergsbus Rish.
If you're new around here, Ripley's my dog. She's a big part of the channel. I wanted to say something because if you don't know that, this dumb little skit's not going to make any sense. So here we go.
What I said.
Ripley, I gotta go. I have some things I have to do today. So you're going to stay here, and you're going to be good. And when I get back later, I'll be bringing the food. And we will be eating that. So don't do anything stupid while I'm gone, because I don't want to have to beat your ass. Okay, so you be good, and I'll be back. And I am loving you, my sis.
What Ripley heard.
Ripley, baby, go. Stay here. Be good. Food. Beat your ass. Be good. And I am loving you, my sis.